Hi, all of you wonderful scuba divers. Welcome to the Scuba Diving Magazine podcast, where I break down the latest scuba diving news and things that have piqued my interest over the previous week. This is a weird week for me because we had the Go Diving show here in the UK, and it just feels like the world stops. But then you suddenly realise that actually it's just really the UK. But still, plenty happened over the previous week. There's been another hit and run boat incident, which has left a scuba diver injured, but this time it's in Florida. 2 missing cave divers have been extricated from a cave system in southern China after a search and rescue operation. A South Korean family has filed a wrongful death lawsuit against a Guam resort, alleging that its negligence caused the death of a 70-year-old snorkeler during a snorkeling lesson. And the big news was that 2 Russian scuba divers died in the Philippines after being swept away in strong currents. So yeah, news reports of a subsequent shark attack on one of the Russian divers seemed likely to relate to injuries sustained after his death. This happened on the 27th of February, and it was all over the news because the news just loves shark attacks. Unfortunately, it's kind of one of those things where it's extremely unlikely that the shark caused his death. It's more likely that the diver died and then the shark came across him. But of course the news were like, oh, shark bites off divers' arms and all this kind of stuff, and it sounds all horrible. But actually, no, it's more likely it just came across the body and just thought, that looks a little bit tasty. The fatal incident occurred off the island of Verde, which lies in the strait between Batangas and Puerto Galera. The divers had been exploring a site at Pulang Bato off the southeast of the island, which seems to be well known for its quite powerful down currents. The fatalities were identified by the Philippine Coast Guard as 29-year-old Ilya Peragudin and Maxim Melekov, who was 39. Their boat, the Ocean Riders from the De Luna Dive Center, had left Puerto Galera at 9:30 a.m. and reached the Pulang Bato site at around 1 p.m. They'd made one dive previously, which was perfectly uneventful. At around 1 p.m. they set off for their second dive in a group that also comprised of 2 family members and a dive master. About half an hour into the dive, strong currents are reported to have suddenly carried the 2 divers away from the rest of the group. The other 3 divers had managed to surface and get back to the boat to raise the alarm. A search and rescue operation was launched by the Coast Guard, and the surviving divers were said to be uninjured. Melekov was found unconscious shortly before 2 p.m. by divers from the Archipelago Divers and Beach Resort and taken by speedboats to a medical center, but he was pronounced dead on arrival at 3:20. Shortly before 6 p.m, the Coast Guard recovered the body of the second diver, who had both arms missing, just offshore from the island. Coast Guard Station Batangas Commander Captain Erland Lapitan later explained that when the rescuers found them, quoting, he was being pulled by a shark. Many sharks were said to have been seen in the vicinity. The captain also said that the bodies had already been processed at a local undertaker's and returned to relatives without having undergone post-mortem examinations. They left it unconfirmed whether Peragudin had already been dead by the time of the shark attack or had been killed by a shark, which would be a very rare occurrence in the Philippines. Only 6 shark-related deaths from 11 encounters have been recorded there in the last 65 years. So it's highly unlikely that the shark caused his death. It's, as I said, it's more likely that he passed away and then the sharks came across his body. However, the Philippine Coast Guard later issued an advisory for divers and dive operators to, quote, exercise heightened vigilance and adhere to strict safety protocols, particularly in area with strong currents and active marine life. Yeah, it's one of those unfortunate things where down currents can suddenly just whip you down. When I was reading a Reddit post, there was someone saying that they were quickly whipped from like 18 down to 40 meters or something, and they say, yeah, it happens incredibly fast. You are briefed about it beforehand to be very, very careful about these kind of things. One of the divers, I think the one that they found unconscious, his BCD was fully inflated, so he's obviously trying to fight that. The second diver with his missing arms, I think I read somewhere that his gear had been missing and had been taken off. Whether that's by him or by marine life, we're unsure. But yeah, diving anywhere with down currents, you really do have to sort of keep your wits about you and just look ahead. I think I did a video about it years ago, sort of looking into the distance, because you can see the like which direction the local marine life are swimming, and the little like we call it snow, but the particles in the water, you can kind of see them moving from a distance. So just try and look up and look for those kind of signs that there might be strong currents ahead of you, and do whatever you can to avoid them. The local guides are going to be the best to advise, so stay close to them if you're ever in an area of really strong currents. In Florida, another hit-and-run boat incident has left a scuba diver injured. The incident occurred about 1.5 kilometers off Oakland Park, which lies between Fort Lauderdale and Pompano Beach on the Atlantic coast, at about 2 p.m. on the 1st of March. The unnamed male diver had been surfacing from an 18-meter deep dive and was reported to have raised an SMB, or a flag, to indicate his presence. The companion driving the dive boat was said to have seen an oncoming boat and shouted and tried to wave to draw the male driver's attention to the diver's presence in the water. The man had appeared to be aware of the warnings, but had carried on and run over the diver and continued on his way. The diver was left with what was described as a severely gashed leg after contact with the boat's propeller, but he had remained conscious as the driver of the boat retrieved him and rushed him to the beach. There, a tourniquet was applied to staunch the bleeding, and emergency services were called. The diver was taken to a local medical center for treatment. The offending boat was described as white, 10 to 13 meters long, with a center console and outboard motors. It was heading north with 2 people on board. Anyone with information or footage has been asked to call Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, which is investigating the incident, on 888-404-3922. Yeah, it's you can never be the. We always used to say when teaching, the most dangerous area whilst scuba diving isn't the really deep down bit, it's the surface, because the surface has a lot of variables. Mainly for like students, is because you're switching between like snorkel and a regulator, and there's like water and air, so you get that kind of not compliance, that's not the right word, but complacency. But you also have boat traffic, and even though you have your diver down flags or whatnot, yeah, it just goes to show a lot of boat users don't really know what the flags mean, and even if you're waving at someone, that kind of draws their attention to you on the boat, and then they're not looking at what's ahead of them in the water. So yeah, just the biggest DSMB possible, and as you're ascending, always be prepared to stop. Always be able to stop at a moment's notice. And as I'm ascending, I'm doing it in like a spiral, looking around and listening, because yeah, boats come out of nowhere, and yeah, you don't want to make contact, because they do make a real mess. I met one diver who, it wasn't so much a boat strike, it was more they were holding onto the side of a rib, getting back in after a dive, and the rib was drifting a bit too close to the reef, so the rib driver just gunned the engine for a little bit just to move them away. Of course, he didn't know this was about to happen. He let his legs like drift underneath the hull of the rib, and of course, as it shot forwards, his legs were still in place, and he has these like tiger stripes down his thigh now. He survived. But yeah, it's not really a scenario that you really want to experience. In southern China, 2 missing cave divers have been extracted from a cave system after a search and rescue operation that lasted almost 3 days and claimed as the nation's first successful cave diving rescue. The men were part of a group of 5 marine biologists who had entered submerged karst caves to carry out research near the city of Bais on the mountainous, Guangxi Zhuang region on the 5th of February. The caves lie at the source of the Haowang River. During their exploration, 2 of their divers lost contact with the others, who notified the local police that they were missing at about 7 p.m. in the afternoon. A rescue team involving police, military, firefighters, paramedics, and dive club members carried out a 69-hour-long joint operation to try and search for them. The 200 by 80 meter chamber at the entrance to the caves contained water to a depth of about 15 meters and led into a maze of winding passages, so the rescue team had to disperse, laying out guidelines in a number of different directions. The police told news agencies that the caves were characterized by intersecting folds and faults, a complex water system, and surging underground rivers that posed great challenges to the rescuers, as did the poor underwater visibility. Rescue divers reported to being able to hear faint knocking sounds, but could not tell which direction they came from. We all know how hard it is to try and determine where sound is coming from underwater. Compound that with being in a cave system, is really tricky, but it's important to know that there's like signs of life. Despite this, they succeeded in finding the first of the missing divers within the first 4 hours of the search in the early hours of the 6th of February. He was located in an air pocket at a depth of 16 meters, some 300 meters from the rescuers' entry point, and was brought out safely within 90 minutes. The second diver, surnamed Zhao, was not, however, found until the early evening of the 8th of February. On the third day of the search, the rescuers had expanded the search area and carried out at least 10 dives before finding Zhao in another air pocket, this one at about 28 meters below the water surface and some 500 meters from the entry point. It took nearly 2 hours to extract the diver, who was described as extremely weak, but a medical examination at the local hospital showed his condition to be stable. In a quote, he said, "I was in great discomfort at the time and began to experience near-death hallucinations." But they've managed to get them both out, which is a massive success. It always brings back memories to the Thai cave system when they had to rescue those boys. But luckily, of course, these are experienced cave divers, so all they just needed was just extra gas to breathe and a bit of help to get them through the cave system. And it's nice that there's a positive outcome here. A South Korean family has filed a wrongful death lawsuit against a Guam resort, alleging that its negligence caused the death of 70-year-old Young Jae Chung during a snorkeling lesson in 2023. His relatives are seeking damages totaling $4,806,900 which is about 3.8 million British pounds. Chung had gone to the US island territory of Guam on the 18th of September 2024 with his wife, son, and 2 young grandsons to celebrate his birthday. They were staying at the Pacific Islands Club in Timon Bay. The snorkeling lesson was hosted by the club with an instructor who's unnamed in the report, taking the family to the beach and into the water. According to the lawsuit, he had neglected to ask his students about their previous snorkeling experience, physical fitness, or comfort levels in the sea. There was allegedly no attempt at training the students to use their snorkels properly before they were guided into deeper water above a coral reef at what was described as, quote, an extremely fast pace. The instructor was said not to have assessed individuals' progress or comfort as they continued. These are all allegations, but yeah, they're quite scary allegations, because even as a snorkeling instructor, you just have a chat with them beforehand and try and gauge their skill level. And even once you're in the water, you're still assessing them. Even if someone says, yeah, I'm like, I do Ironman swims and all this kind of stuff, and yeah, don't worry about me, I'm still worrying about you. I'm still watching you until I physically see that you're quite comfortable in the water. I'm within arm's reach. This instructor allegedly was not. Chung and his wife had struggled to keep up, and Chung's mask was said to have been filling with water, not uncommon with rental equipment and new divers. If a small amount of water gets in, their first response is usually to pull the straps tighter, which ironically makes them leak even more. And rental gear isn't always the fanciest, so it doesn't have fancy skirt seals. So it's not unusual for students to have water in their masks. But if you haven't told them how to get rid of it, then yeah, they're going to have, and especially if you're steaming on, you're swimming off, leading the pack, they've got water in their mask, they're less likely to want to like just hold and just sit still for a bit, clear their mask, and then continue on, because they don't want to lose you, the instructor. So they're going to try and do it on the move, which just puts more stress on the situation. So yeah, lots of red flags here. The wife was said to have observed that the instructor had failed to notice that her husband had remained face down for a prolonged period of time. She called to her son, who realized that something was wrong. As he saw Chung floating immobile, he had shouted for help as he carried his father towards the shore. It took the instructor 2 to 3 minutes to follow them ashore, according to the family, who state that he then appeared to attempt CPR without first removing Chung's life jacket. It was not clear whether all students had been wearing life jackets. The lifeguards for the resort were said to have taken 5 minutes to reach the scene after the alarm was raised. They had removed Chung's life jacket before applying a defibrillator and performing CPR. Chung was declared dead after being taken to a local hospital, and the family had to pay more than $6,900 to cover the costs of the emergency services. The family is now seeking $2 million for wrongful death, $1 million for loss of support for Chung's wife, $300,000 each for the loss of support for his 2 sons, and $300,000 each as compensation for emotional distress for the 4 relatives present at the scene. The lawsuit was filed in the District Court of Guam on the 18th of February. Last year, another snorkeling-related legal action was brought and has yet to be settled by Patricia Johnson, who has accused the Fairmont Kea Lani Resort in Hawaii, the Hawaiian Tourism Authority, and Hawaii Visitors and Convention Bureau of negligence after her husband Ray died after snorkeling at Wailea Beach on Maui. The coroner has concluded that Ray Johnson's death was due to drowning, but his wife maintains that it was caused by a form of IPO, emergency pulmonary edema, and they have not been warned about the risks of the condition. It's becoming a bigger and bigger thing, diagnosing IPO, and you might just find that the local resorts don't know about these things, so why would they? And it's going to get to a stage where if you want to go snorkeling on our beach, you literally have to read through and sign this disclaimer and go through a PowerPoint presentation on IPO. It's just snorkeling. I mean, we go scuba diving all the time, so snorkeling seems easy to us, but it still can occur. So it is important to read up on like IPO, the signs and symptoms, and if you ever feel like breathless in the water, just get somewhere to safety, ideally out of the water. Mention your signs and symptoms to like a lifeguard or something, and they'll keep an eye on you. And if anyone like appears breathless, I mean, if I was in that situation where I was on a snorkeling lesson and the instructor is just like plowing on, you can just kind of, obviously it's all situational, but I personally would probably stop and just turn back, especially if they're like heading further out into deeper water. No, I'd just stop. Tell my family no. Would try and get the instructor's intention, obviously, but if they continue on, then there are bad instructor, honestly, in my opinion. That they should have your well-being like topmost in their mind. They should never be like more than 1 or 2 body lengths away, because say someone suddenly gets cramp or something in the water, even if they are wearing a life jacket, that doesn't mean that they're perfectly safe. So it's just, if there are any red flags, then I tend to sort of voice them. Don't just go along with it, just question those kind of things. Onto new dive equipment. We had the Go Diving show here in the UK, so I did get to see lots of shiny stuff. The main one that stuck out for me, well, there are a couple. I was talking with Mares, and I think I've spoken about the new Mares puck versions before. And I noted that on one website I saw a Mares Puck Lite, which was like a bit more stripped down version of their Puck 4. And I also saw somewhere a Mares Puck Pure, which I thought, oh, okay, they brought out a third version, but actually they suggested it's more of a regional name. So in some regions they didn't like the name Pure or Light, and vice versa. So they just give it a different name in a different region. It's the same computer, it's just got a different name. It's like cars. There are some car models that in some countries it has a different name. The main one that comes to mind is the Honda. Well, here in the UK we call it the Honda Jazz. In most countries around the world it's called the Honda Fit. But in the UK, Japan, and Brazil, I believe it's called the Jazz. But for some reason, everywhere else in the world calls it a different name. And it's similar to dive computers, it seems. I managed to get my hands on the new version of the Avanti Quattro fins. It's the Avanti 4X, I think they're calling it. It's had some upgrades, mainly in the foot pocket area. It's got the crisscross detailing that's on the extreme fins for a better snap, and on the heel, on the sole of the boot, you've got a bit more grip and just some extra detailing. If you see it from a distance, it's the Avanti Quattro, but it's had some upgrades, so that's pretty cool. The new orange colorway is going throughout their range, which is pretty cool. So mask fins, their backplate BCDs. They also have their laser torch on show. I forget, is it the EOS? I forget the name of it. But it's a regular dive torch. But if you hold down the button, I think if you do something with the button, you get a green laser pointer, which is quite handy. If there's something pointy, or something with pointed teeth that you want to point to your buddy, but you don't want to dazzle it with an entire torch beam, you've got this laser pointer to really circle it. So that's pretty cool. Otherwise, some interesting things from Namu Tech, which is quite interesting. I saw some hose organizers, which are pretty cool. So for side-mounted cylinders, you normally tuck your hoses down underneath some rubber inner tubings. They can sometimes get messy and it can be kind of annoying, and if it triggers you if you've got OCD to try and keep them nice and neat. They actually have these little inserts that go around your cylinder that you can clip those hoses into. They're quick release, so you can just pull them free, but it keeps the hoses nice and neat and tidy, which I thought was pretty cool. And typical Namu, they come in every different color under the rainbow. What else did I see? I think that was... there were quite a few new things. There was a chat with I think it was SUK. They do a... what do you call it? The back of your hand mirror, so that you can see behind you. And that was all made out of recycled materials. I was talking with the boys at Dive Devils. They're working on something pretty cool. Dive Devils do a metal dog tag for your dive equipment. I have one in one of my thigh pockets with all of my emergency contact details. So should anyone find me unresponsive, they know who to contact to identify me, as it were. But yeah, they're working on other things which are pretty cool, and they've got the best business cards because they do laser engraving on metal plates. Their business cards are just a sheet of metal with their information laser etched onto it, which is very cool. But yeah, I got a little bit of time for some Ask Mark questions. So Mustafa Metwali1 asks, could you do a video on how to deal with the valves and manifold on twin cylinders? It's confusing to remember which way to open the valves, and it's easy to get wrong, particularly in emergencies. I mean, it's kind of the right-hand side is very easy because that's quite intuitive. You kind of roll it towards your ear. The center isolator just screws in as you normally would, and the left is the opposite. So it screws away from your ear. It's practice. You should be running shutdown drills during your twin set training. But yeah, a lot of it's just practice, and you run through that S drill. Danny Berg, I'm looking to get into side mount in the future. I can get a second first stage and convert my current regulator sets over to side mount. My question is, will the constant switching back and forth of hoses prematurely wear out or damage the threads on the first stage? Would it be advisable to just have a regulator set just for back mount and another? That's really up to you. It is going to wear it a bit, but I swap hoses over so frequently to get the regulator assembly that I like. As long as you're not over torquing it, hoses go in at 5 Newton meters, most of them. So you really don't have to wrench them in. Well, correction, you have to wrench them in, but only so tight that you can't unscrew it by hand, if that makes sense. If you do it any more, then yes, you can start to damage it. But if you're doing it correctly, then no, it's very unusual to see like wear and tear. When we pull a first stage apart, we don't look at the port plug or the ports and go, "Cool, someone's been like putting a hose in and out of this really frequently." That's not really a thing. So I wouldn't worry too much about it. If you do have the disposable income to have a separate regulator set just for back mount, then yes, that's the perfect solution for this issue. But I wouldn't worry too much. Just take it easy. Try and use a fixed size spanner. The adjustable ones can loosen, and it's not unusual to round the corners of the nut with an adjustable. So yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about it. Just make sure that you're doing it properly and nice and carefully. But I wouldn't worry too much about having to get an extra regulator. And finally, John Job 9523, you mentioned first stage is freezing up when the flow rate is increased. I live in the Caribbean, so this is absolutely not an issue for me. I'd never ruled it out. You'd have to have a fairly strong free flow for a long time for it to freeze, but I imagine it probably would happen eventually. Anyway, but do you ensure that the cylinder isn't too cold before going diving? Do you warm your tanks with a jacket? No, I don't think I've ever seen anyone like pre-warm their cylinders or anything before a dive. It's more just air going through it's air going from a high pressure to a low pressure that reduces temperature. So you get it with an aerosol can. If you have a spray on like deodorant or something, if you spray that for a extended period, the can gets cold because the contents are going from a high pressure to a low. A high pressure to a low pressure, and the opposite happens when you fill them up. Your cylinders get hot, and yeah, you'll see on a lot of cold water regulators, especially that are sold as like cold water, they have all these like ribbing like details to really increase the surface area to volume ratio to like absorb as much heat from the surrounding water as possible. But no, even diving in like the Arctic, we just used steel cylinders that were like kept in a shed. It's not that much of an issue, and I've never like worried about my cylinders being cold before diving here in the UK. It's just everything's cold. Get used to it. But yeah, as you say, it does heighten the risk because things are already cold. They're closer to the freezing point. But no, it's more of a matter of don't when we're testing our regulators, we don't tend to like push the purge button unless it's like right in our or close to our mouth, so it's less likely to free flow. And some things are dialed in a little bit stiffer. So if you get the Apex MTX R regulator, that was derived from their military MTX regulator as like a civilian version, and that was designed as a just not literally bulletproof, but just a tough regulator that the military boys could just throw on a cylinder no matter where they are in the world. And what most people found, or one of the biggest complaints in the recreational market was, hey, it breathes quite stiff. You have to inhale quite hard to actually open the valve, and that's because it's like an anti-freezing anti-free-flowing measure. So yeah, you can go to your dive center and say, hey, I'm going on a dive somewhere particularly cold. Can you just stiffen these up a little bit? I even have a Poseidon regulator, which has a separate like rubber cap that goes over the top of it that I don't know whether you were supposed to, but it's just what divers did. You fill it with alcohol, the alcoholic beverage of your choice, because alcohol doesn't freeze, and you would then zip tie that over it, and that would help to prevent it from freezing. And then after the dive, you got a shot. More modern regulators, like a lot of the atomic regulators, if you look at their first stages, they've got this like black silicone band around the midsection. If you have a peak underneath that, there's like a whole load of white grease. Similar thing in action. You're just preventing that cold water from getting to certain moving parts and freezing up. So yeah, but no, we don't warm up our cylinders before a dive as much as I'd like to. Can you imagine having like a warm air option? That was Atomic actually tried that. They developed, and it's probably still available, a coil that you attach to your cylinder, and you run the gas line from your first stage through this coil and then to your second stage, and they claimed that actually like warmed the gas up a little bit, which is pretty cool. Maybe one day there'll be an electronic version so that we can have like a warm gas. I'd be connecting that to my dry suit so you can have a warm gas button to really warm you up. But yeah, the future is bright. Anyway, that's it for this week. Thank you everyone for listening, and remember to head over to our website divernet.com. Check out all of the latest scuba diving news. Remember to like, share, subscribe to all that good social media stuff. Thank you for listening, everybody, and of course, safe diving.